everybody. I'm Jen Krieger, and I am the VP of Engineering Operations and also the Chief of Staff to the CTO at GitHub. And morning, I was born and raised in New York City. Those of you who come from the East Coast know exactly what I mean when I say that. I aim not to offend anybody, but if I do, please let me know, and I will do my utmost to apologize to you. I had a great time at this conference last year. It's the first time I've been to a conference, probably in the past 15 years, where I actually showed up and learned something. I actually learned from the folks who were attending. The community was amazing, and I am hoping that you all feel that vibe today. I really honestly was surprised. I'm surprised at how many of you are out there. I honestly thought it was a very small audience, right? But it is not, and it's growing. And I am, boistered by that, and enthusiastic about it. And honestly, just can't wait to see what we all learn together today, and also where we go on our journey together. And so I'm here because of each and every one of you. Countless of you have reached out to me over the course of the last year. And the interesting thing for me was many of you were asking me for career advice. You were like, hey, how do I become somebody like you? And I'm going to be completely honest, I still don't know why you guys were asking me. I really don't. I have spent most of my career learning. And by that, I really mean I fail, I mess up, and then I kind of try to do something that doesn't put me in that position again. And what this talk is going to be about is taking you through that journey and sharing what I have learned along the way so that maybe you can apply some of those learnings to what you're currently facing in your own jobs or life. And so we're going to travel through the years of me being a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed little kitten who thought she knew everything about everything to where I am today, which is perhaps a wee bit older, wiser, and I'm going to just be honest, singed. And I learned a heck ton along the way, and so we're going to go through that together, and we're going to take a journey through my 30-year career. One that starts with the overachiever phase, and for those of you who are in the room, overachievers, raise your hand. Anybody? Yep, yeah, be honest, please. We're going to talk about the miscommunication error. We're going to say maybe a few words about saying yes to everything all the time. And then we're going to enter into the turning point, which may or may not equal success. We'll discover together. And so let's start with the overachiever phase. So what was the overachiever phase of my career? And so in my early 20s, I was actually not a TPM. Surprise, surprise, right? I was actually a financial analyst for a relocation company that was processing relocations, and my job was processing expense reports. And I really wanted to get out of the situation I was in. I was a new recent college grad. I was making $23,000 a year. Yeah, just sit with that for a second. Living with my parents, and I was not okay with that. Sorry, Mom, Dad. And I really wanted to get out, so I thought perhaps if I just tried harder, that somebody would recognize that and maybe give me a promotion and I'd make more money, right? And so that kind of amounted to me working 70-hour work weeks. I was cranking out those expense reports at a rate, that was like astronomically high. And I'm just going to be honest, I was the one who said no to your expense report, and I am not sorry about that. The policy is the policy, people. Back then, I was working a lot. And quite frankly, I thought it would result in this positive thing. And so does anybody guess what actually happened? Yeah, well, my coworkers kind of were pissed at me, right? In fact, furious. I was processing the most expense reports across the company, and it wasn't, people didn't know that because they had some sort of report they ran. Let's just be honest, those reports didn't exist back then, and they don't really exist now either. And it wasn't because they had a company meeting and celebrated me. No, it was more because I was that 20-year-old. I was running around, making sure everybody knew what I was doing. And I was Nelson. I was pointing out my successes on the backs of other people. Haha, indeed, right? A little bit of obnoxious. This is what the overachiever phase kind of looked like for me. And it definitely led to a lot of different outcomes than what I actually expected it to lead to. Certainly didn't lead to promotion. In fact, it was far more negative because I didn't know everything as a 20-year-old. In fact, maybe I didn't actually know what the policy was, and I might have said no to things more often than I should have, thus upsetting the customers who were paying for the service. And when I left, there was no big grand send-off party for that work that I had done. In fact, I'm pretty sure they had an after party when I left, right? So I'm here to tell you, say it with me, folks, the volume of tasks is never going to equal impact. I am never going to promote anyone on my team because they send 5% more emails or attend 5% more meetings than the person sitting next to them. That to me is not impact. What I am looking for is actually the impact of the work that that individual selects on the people around them, on the program environment around them, and on the company as a whole. And some of the most successful TPMs I observe today, as well as in my career, understand that implicitly. So much so that they might even jeopardize getting yelled at because they're not going to pick up that small task that somebody doesn't want to do. You know, that thing like taking notes in a meeting or going and running after somebody to get that task done. They're not going to do that work because it is a low value activity for their time. And I leave you with that for now. We're going to come back to it. The reason why this is important is because it is about the flow of work. And so your value is finding those things that are going to increase the flow of work. Let's talk about actual examples of impact for TPM, because I want to make this practical for you all. So the first one I have for you is you are attentive and proactive. There is never going to be a time where a developer is always going to see everything in their ecosystem and what is going on. They're also not going to be able to somehow be able to prioritize that backlog of 1,000 different things that they have on their plate. What your job is to pay attention to that. But it doesn't just stop there. You're not that person who shows up and says, well, you've had 5 security vulnerabilities for the last 9 months, and you're still got those 5 security vulnerabilities. Why do you suck so hard, right? You're not going to do that. You're going to work with that team to understand what the relative priority of those items are. You're going to work with that product manager or the person who helps prioritize that work to make sure it actually gets done. Or you're going to spend a lot of time talking about the risk of what could potentially happen if it doesn't get fixed, right? Security breaches are actually pretty impactful. The second thing I want to talk about is that you're going to be realistic in the way that you're thinking about things. And so I assume that every single presentation today is going to talk something about estimates, time estimates. Our job usually has the task of asking, how long do you think you're going to take on that? And usually the response is a couple of hours. And I know that you all know that that couple of hours actually means 2 months, a miracle, and probably a slew of pizzas, right? Let's stop using story points. Let's start using pizzas as a form of measurement for how long something should take. The thing and the trick here is it's not just about the minimal amount of time that the developer team or that product manager or that marketing executive needs to get the task done. It's also that you're baking in time for them to actually take a deep breath before they move to the next thing. And if you're not helping protect that, you're not being a real impactful TPM. You're also a master translator. And so many of us do work for tech companies, and we do work with people who are extremely technical. But there is always going to be that leader you're talking to who has no idea what you are talking about. And I'm going to be honest with you, each one of you, you have it in you to do this thing where you listen to the tech folks, and then you translate to somebody who is in a business role. And you do this thing where it allows for each side of the fence to understand where the other person is. This is critical. And I'm going to be really frank with you. Stop using acronyms. Spell that stuff out. Use plain language. Stop calling your project some sort of secret project name, because the amount of time that you take to respond when they say, what is that thing, is work you should not be doing. See back to that impactful work you choose. And then the final thing you're going to understand is you know what your leader wants. And just pro tip here, it ain't what you think it is. And so let's talk about what leaders really want, AKA what I really want. And yes, indeed, that is a Taylor Swift joke. Leaders worry about overruns. And budget overruns, time overruns, all these things equal pretty much a normal day for an executive. Let's just be super frank. The amount of times somebody will come to me and say, we might have underestimated that, like, compute bill, and we might need like $1 billion extra, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm sure we have $1 billion extra in a bucket somewhere. We'll just pull it over here and we'll bring it in and it will be fine. That's actually not the case, right? Obviously, it's not the case. So we expect things to never be on track. Let's just be honest. We also have experience in that 2 hours equals 2 months, a miracle and a pizza, right? So we expect things to not stay on track. But what we don't need you to do is not tell us why and not tell us how you're going to recover, right? So when that person comes to me and says, I need $1 billion for that compute, I'm like, okay, great, I will find the $1 billion for me if you tell me what you're going to stop doing or paying for that might recover some of that cost, right? So be prepared and have that type of answer. They also need delivery, timely delivery of concise information, right? I'm going to be honest with you. If I have to ask you what is going on, it's already too late. I already am in a desperate need for information, and likely what might happen is I ask a question and you're like, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to go have to find out, and it's going to take a couple hours. I don't have a couple of hours. Likely it's because the CEO or somebody above me is asking for that question or that information, and they don't have time to wait either. And so keep that in mind when you're thinking through some of the way that you're communicating with your executives. They oftentimes don't know what they need. The number of times I've asked for something from my team, and I'm like, I just need this thing, come up with some information for me and come back to me, and they're like, what did that even mean? Is pretty high. And so I am relying on each and every one of you to understand what your job is and to be that expert. I hired you, I pay you a lot of money to demonstrate that expertise, and so you should have the confidence to come to me and say, here's what I think you need, and then I can respond to that. I'm never going to be able to respond to a blank page. It's just not where my brain is on a regular basis. And it kind of leads to that last point, which is, I'm not in the details like everybody else is. And so you guys probably have maybe one program, maybe two programs, depending on the volume and the size, right, the complexity. I have like 45 on a regular basis. And every one I'm trying to limp along one step at a time. And so if somebody comes to me and they're telling me their deep, like in the weeds details about the thing that they're doing, I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, and I feel really dumb. And so I have to get people to stop and give me like a 30-second update, like, what are you talking about? Please just start there. Do that in your documents, do that when you're talking to people, even do it in like your Slack messages, or if you're on Teams or wherever you're texting people. Give a little brief thing, but also make sure you're doing it in a very timely way. If you're going to do a TLDR that's going to take 15 minutes, I'm going to be yawning and probably working on something else while you're doing that because I don't have time for that, right? And then the final thing is I want practical solutions. And I'll be honest with you, never go to an executive, a leader, or somebody who appears to be relatively busy and tell them you have a problem, and that's where the period is. Okay, well, what do you recommend? You are indeed the expert in the room, right? Right? I expect you to be that expert. And so I do actually want you to have some ideas about how you might want to solve that problem. Now, just as a nuance, if you do actually not have any ideas whatsoever, like you've spent all this time thinking it through and you're like, I really don't know what to do and I really need some advice, just say that. Just say, hey, I've been working on this problem for a while. Have you ever seen this before? Because I really don't know what to do. That's a different question than, here's this problem, now what are we going to do about it? I don't know, you tell me, right? So let's go into the miscommunication error. So have anybody had like an experience where someone's mouth is moving? Words are coming out and they're going into your ears, and the only thing that's going on your face is this? Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Pretty much all the time, actually. And I want to say this was actually pretty much my entire 30s, but rather than me going, huh, it was pretty much everybody else around me as I was talking. And so what advice do I have for you if you struggle with this, or maybe you don't even know, and you're like, oh, why do people never respond to me the way that I think they should? Well, there might be something that you're doing. And so how do you communicate like a TPM? And so the first thing is you're prepared and you know your stuff, okay? You never go into a meeting without understanding what the key business priorities are for the thing you are supporting. You do your research. You are concise, you understand what's going on in the environment, you never show up unprepared. It's okay not to know the answer to questions. It's okay to say, look, I really don't know what the answer to that question is, I'll get back to you. But I assure you, each one of you has a brain in your head and you are deeply intelligent. And you can do this, you can show up like this. And I assure you, the people around you will actually very much appreciate it. The second thing is you need to listen, understand, not respond. For those of you who struggle with this, it's the act of actively listening until that person you are listening to gets to the end of the sentence and there's a period, and you pause for like maybe just a couple of seconds, and then you respond. You need to do this because it is going to do two things for you. The first one is going to be that you actually will hear what they're having to say instead of in your brain going, okay, this person is saying this thing and I deeply regret that they're wrong. And so now I've got to work on the rebuttal in my head. And you have missed everything that has come out of that person's mouth the second you started that thinking in your head. The second thing it's going to do for you is human connection, which, if you don't know, is the cornerstone of the success of this role. If the people around you don't like you or they don't feel like you're on their side, they're likely going to treat you like that note taker project manager that you don't want to actually be treated like, right? The third thing is you need to speak with confidence, but not arrogance. And so right now I am on stage speaking with confidence. Do we all agree that I sound confident? The only reason why I am able to do this is because I took speaker training class. If all of you are terrified to stand on a stage like this and present in front of an audience, you need to get your butts into a speaker training class. The reason is because you will be doing this every step along the way in your career. The audiences might be smaller, but I will tell you they will be more stressful. My boss isn't in the room right now, and so I am not stressed out. But when I do present to my boss and the CEO and the folks above them, it is very stressful. And so if I don't have the skill set to rely on, I am not going to be able to speak in a way that will have them feel confident in that what I know is what I know, and I am probably right about it, right? So make sure you are actually working on that. The other thing I want to point out is you are going to be challenged. Every single one of you is going to work with an audience of people called engineers, and they're always going to nitpick every little word that comes out of your mouth. Be prepared to defend your position, but do not take it personally. If you do, you are setting yourself back worlds of time on a human connection level, all sorts of different things. Engineers live to argue. They do not mean anything by it. They really don't. And so if you can embrace that, it will help you as time goes on. So this is your most important job. This is actually how you do that. If you join meetings, if you send out a status report, if you are communicating with your company and you are not doing these things, you are indeed the problem. Your job is to reduce the chaos, not add to it. And so let's talk about the yes to everything year. How many of you have a to-do list that looks like this kitten's? Like me? Yeah? Yeah. So this is the yes to everything. And so this is really what my to-do list has looked like for years. And it's pretty much what it looks like today. But I am more confident to like maybe stick those sticky notes in the trash can when I don't have time now in my career. This is really a very difficult thing to deal with as a TPM because part of what happens is you get emotionally attached to your program and you want to see it do well, so you kind of do everything that anybody isn't doing to help make sure things are successful. This is an anti-pattern. And what I need for each one of you to understand is good TPMs pick the most impactful work, not busy work, not taking notes in meetings, right? probably you're going to take notes in meetings, but probably not all the time, right? You're not ordering pizza, you're not, I mean, for the most part, maybe you're not scheduling meetings, folks, right? You're not that person that's always doing those things. It's not just about having to do all that busy work so that engineers feel like they can have their hands on keyboards coding all the time. That's not important. What's important is the work that you are doing is actually adding to the impact of the program and the team at whole. So let's talk a little bit about how to get there. And so you may not want to hear this, but if you don't understand what your own personal career goals are, you need to start thinking about it now. And it's not to say that you can't reset those things or say one thing and then maybe 3 months later say, you know what, I was wrong, I'm going to go do this way. But if you come to somebody like me, which happens frequently, and say, I don't really know who I want to be when I grow up, my response is going to be, yeah, me too. You got any ideas? Because if you look at my career history, I've been a product manager, I've been in IT, I've been like an agile coach, I've done a lot of different things. And it's because I know one thing about myself and about the career I want to have, and that's like, I like solving cool problems. And so, of course, the chief of staff side of my job is all about solving problems. And there is never one problem that is the same. And so that's actually ideal for me. And my career didn't follow, I wanted to be a product manager, I wanted to be an agile coach, no, it followed, oh, this is an interesting problem. Let me go figure out what to do here. Oh, this is another interesting problem. And so you need to understand that about yourself and use that as a way to set the goals that you're actually achieving on a daily basis, weekly, quarterly, whatever it is you're actually doing on your work. Because when you are actually attaching the things that you are doing on a day-to-day basis to the thing that you are most passionate about, what do you think happens, right? It's actually pretty good for you. So the next thing is you need to avoid perfectionism and learn to say no. And I'm not talking about saying no to your colleagues. I'm talking about saying no to yourself. As in, yeah, I'm not going to do that. As in, yeah, I know that this work is on fire over here and I probably could do something about it, but that's not for me to do. The other thing, which I still struggle with today, is this word perfectionism. So how many of you work late just to get that one thing perfectly aligned, that the view, the dashboard is perfect? Yeah, that's me too. Don't do that. Embrace the phrase good enough for now, because I will assure you, if you ask the person you are trying to do that thing for, hey, this is where I stopped after 4 hours, what do you think? Is this good enough for now? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. And so all that effort you spent to make it perfect is lost effort, and that's not going to be noticed by anyone. Don't waste your time. And the final thing is, you need to prioritize self-care. And I know I'm joking about doing your nails and going on that bike ride or buying that car that influencer said, but it's actually more serious than that. And so you have to learn how to set boundaries in your job. And if you feel fearful about setting those boundaries, it's likely because you didn't set them from the very beginning. So the way that I do this is when I go out on PTO, I know that likely my phone is going to get a text message on it, right? I'm definitely going to get pinged by someone. And so the bottom line for me is I have a soft out, I am soft out on PTO, or I am hard out on PTO. Soft out for me means I will likely look at your text message and say something along the lines of, I have 30 minutes to resolve this, what do you need? So I am sending a boundary, as in I am not going to spend the entire day on your problem. I've got 30 minutes, let's fix it right now. If they don't respond, they are SOL, folks. And that's an acronym, which I cannot repeat here because I'm trying to not violate the code of conduct. This is the most important part about picking impactful work, because if you are burned out, if you are overwhelmed, it's likely because your task list is this big and there's something in that task list you probably could jettison, right? And it's likely because you didn't set those boundaries up front. So let's talk about the turning point. This is where I figure out whether or not actually I'm at the point in my career where I can consider myself successful. I still don't think I'm successful. That might be surprising to everybody in this room. I am somebody who has lots of imposter syndrome. And the only thing I can point to as to why my career accelerated so much over the course of the last 8 years is because I just know what I want now. And I'm not willing to take any of the other stuff that goes on. And so here's where it gets hard. It's not easy to know what you want, right? It's not easy, but it is critical. And so let's actually dig into this a little bit. So how many of you know what this is? Yeah, so we need to talk a little bit. So how many of you have gone into a conversation where the engineer goes, hey, we got to pause this feature work because we have to implement this new database technology. And you're on the other side of the table and you're going, we have 45 database technologies in production today. What is this new database technology actually going to get us? How many? Right? All the time. And what is problematic about that? They led with a solution, not the problem, right? What do you think y'all are doing by bringing that into a meeting? So this is what you need to do. And this is actually what I triangulate on when I understand what the turning point is for me. It's never going to be about that framework, that report you want, that issue you want updated by a certain time every week. It's never going to be that. It's always going to be asking simply, what is the problem we're meant to solve here? And guess who is never going to answer that question? You. If you are answering that question, you done something wrong. And also, you're never going to lead with a solution. Instead, you're going to stick Safe 0.0 into a big, maybe magic bag of +5 holding with all of your TPM skills in it. And when somebody says, hey, look, we're getting too massive, we have a lot of distributed teams, there's a lot of work crossing thing, and we need some way to get everybody in a room so we can all agree to the priorities for the next quarter. You go, I might have something, right? That's how you have that conversation. But you don't start the conversation with your CEO going and saying, hey, I went to this conference and I learned about this thing called SAFE. That is not how to start the conversation. Because what you're going to discover is the things you want to fix are never, and I'm removing the likely, they're never going to be aligned to what your CEO actually wants fixed. And this is something I oftentimes struggle with, primarily because I think a VP should probably know what a CEO wants on a regular basis. But here's the pro tip here. I don't know what is on his plate. I can't. There's no way. I've got my 45 things on my plate. My team doesn't know about my 45 things, right? I don't know what's on my boss's plate, even though I am his chief of staff. Like, there's a lot going on that I never get read in on. And so it is kind of like egotistical for me to think that I would know what is going on for him on a regular basis, right? And you should consider that, not just for the CEO of your company, but all of the people that cycle around your program. Your engineers, you don't know what's on their plate. I am assuring you, you don't know. You might think you do, but you don't know. And so the most important thing I am learning right now, and I am working on this, is that 9 times out of 10, I'm wrong. That's just flat out. Like, I think I know what the right answer is, but I'm going to be wrong. And that's okay, right? It's okay. I've discovered the best thing for me to do is just let those things I'm super passionate about just go. Because in that letting it go, like, let it go, Elsa, right? I get to actually do a thing where I know it's still in that tool belt. And when that person comes to me and they say something that is really important to them, at some point they're going to be asking for that thing I'm passionate about, and I'm going to be able to take it out and use it. And so the more you learn to let things go, the more successful you're going to be, period, and stop. And this is what equals impact. It's the bottom line, folks. So in summary, a seat at the table is never given. It is only earned. And you earn it by taking the point of view of how I talked about communication in general. That's how you earn that seat. What you think is important is rarely ever going to be that thing. And the most important way that you understand what is important is just ask. What is your priority? What is the problem we're trying to solve here? It's really okay to understand those things. And then finally, you're going to learn to let things go because I am asking you to. And that is going to help you become more successful, just simply because the emotionality of that thing you're passionate about, you can detach yourself from it. If you're that person that spent like 15,000 years on that document and you sent it to somebody and they send it back and it's got about 50,000 corrections on it, how awful is that going to be for you? Let it go. It's okay. I promise you, this is the formula for why I am in the position I am in today. I don't have anything more for y'all. And so with that, thank you. Do we have time for questions? Yeah. Anyone? Should I ask myself a question? Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi there, thank you. I'm Johnny, I work at Waymo. So you talked a little bit about the fact that when you go to a leader, you always should come with solutions. But then you also said, don't bring the solution to the table. How do you rectify that?
Look at it this way. A solution for me is something to the extent of, so let me back up. So when I say don't come to the table with a solution, the difference between those two things is when you come to the table with the solution, you are not actually leading with the problem that you are trying to solve, right? And so when you've got the problem defined and you're going to an executive and you're saying, this is the problem we are experiencing, here are 3 ways that we might be able to mitigate the risk, that's way different than, here's something I want to do because I heard about it at a conference. Do you see the difference between those two things? Okay, cool. Thanks, Waymo. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Great talk. I want to go on the same point about solution-first thinking, and how do you inspire teams to stop that? So specifically, we want to align on what the exact problem is, but every person in the room is excited about their potential solution, and we never make it to the problem.
Yeah. It is probably the thing I've been struggling with for pretty much my entire career. When I was a junior program or project manager when I first started in tech, I didn't understand why we spent all this time talking about tech that we were never going to implement. And I wasn't really experienced enough to really understand how to redirect that conversation. And then Agile tried to implement user stories, which had that, like, what are you actually trying to achieve? And the engineers would write the first 2 parts of that, and they would ignore, like, the customer outcome. The best way I know to actually push away from that is to bring a customer perspective into the conversation. And so you always bring them back to what it is that we're actually trying to achieve. And so in that case of the database technology, so it is likely that they're interested in this database technology because it might make things quicker. And so the actual problem is that the website, the thing that you're doing, the thing that the customer is using isn't fast enough. And so if you can so you can do things for them like, I hear you want to make this new technology. What is the reason that we're actually going to do that? Is there some benefit that we're going to get to the customer so we can talk that up when we're actually talking about why this work is important? If you do work with good product managers, they're actually going to ask that question for you. And if you don't actually have that environment, you should ask that question for the audience, if you would. Over here.
Hi, I'm Anu. Great talk, by the way. I found it very interactive and practical. Not so much question, but I had a thought on your last point about let it go, and I was thinking about practicality of it from TPM perspective.
Yeah.
Often, it is hard to let it go, because if you have spent 50,000 hours on the document and if you received 1,000 error, it is expected action and corrective action on that, right? So could you a little bit elaborate on that let it go concept from the TPM perspective?
Yeah. What I mean by that is when you get to the point where you're writing a document and it's taking you 50,000 hours and you're in your little hut and no one's seeing it, maybe you should try to use that word iterative and get feedback along the way and actually check in with folks to make sure that you're on the right path. That's going to help you with that thing because you'll get that document in front of somebody before you get to the point where they're going to slice it to shreds, right? I've been in meetings where executives are presenting to executives, and these executives have spent countless hours to put something together, and I've watched, like leadership teams cut them to shreds over it. It is really hard to deal with that. And as a TPM, a lot of times your job responsibility is to make sure things are actually going well. And so sometimes you can't let things go. It's not so much about, hey, we need that thing prioritized. Tell me what the relative priority is. I'm not suggesting you let that go. That's certainly not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that thing that you are so sure is going to fix everything, Scrum, stand-ups, program reporting, all this stuff that is in your head about effective TPMing, if your teams that you're working with are resisting to it, let it go. Find out what's going to help them actually get their work done. The number of times in my career I've been asked whether or not teams should do stand-ups or not is not 0. It's in fact way, way higher than 0. And I'm be honest with you, I don't care. I really don't care. What I care about is when work passes boundaries of teams and making sure there's consistency there. And so you've got to understand what to actually champion. And I'm assuring you, like a lot of the stuff that I desire to champion over the course of my career didn't matter to anyone. And so listen to your engineers, listen to your product managers, ask them how they want to actually get work done. Because I'm going to tell you, like, if you are actually understanding what they want and you're doing the things that they want, that relationship is really positive. You're going to actually get them to want to work with you more, which means you'll have more information. It's just a different way of looking at it. And I know many of you may be inside of the infernal PMO style way of working where you have to do certain things certain ways. Don't put that burden on the people around you if you can, right? Your job isn't just simply a status collector and show up with your TPS report and then I'll put the TPS reports together and give them to LT. That's not your job, folks. Your job is definitely not that. Your job is to help the people around you actually get the work done so that the company is actually successful. It's about outcome, not tasks. Do we have time for maybe one more question? I have no idea what time it is.
Yes, one more question. From the remote room. People transitioning to this career, we still start with basic tasks. Is it just to wait patiently till the time comes for me to let go since I'm still mastering being a note-taker, scheduler, or meeting too?
Yeah, again, the letting it go isn't about those basic tasks. Like, you're probably still going to need to create that Gantt chart. Don't let that Gantt chart go. It's going to help you understand what's going on, and if that's what you prefer to use. What I am talking about is really going in hard on frameworks and just things that the audience does not care about. You know what these things are, and if you're early in career, you're going to need to look to your peers above you to understand what that is for your company. Perfect example for the one that I worked at previous to the one I work at right now. I had the executive team saying, "Thou shalt do Agile across the board." And when I would work with the engineering teams, they were like, "This is a load of nonsense." And I agreed with them because it wasn't going to help them actually do the thing that they needed to do. And so what the question for me is, well, what do you want to do? Let's help you do that thing. And then as we were doing that thing, I would observe, hey guys, you really aren't that good at planning. Let's practice that, right? And so you're going to get the thing you want. You just need to not approach it like a bulldog, right? You need to approach it maybe from the side, maybe when that person actually likes you. But if you enter a room, like I did earlier in my career, and say, we're going to do a 4-hour planning meeting every 2 weeks, and those engineers don't even know who you are, that's not going to work out for you. It's just not.
All right. We want to, in interest of time, we want to stop Q&A right now because there's a 15-minute block for networking and transition to other hall. But feel free to reach out to Jen through LinkedIn or other channels with your questions and answers. Thank you again for a great talk. Yeah.